Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, and it's time, because I have been playing a lot of it, to look at 7.3 and the new features and give my thoughts on it with a whole bunch of new stuff that's happening in 7.3. Of course, 7.3 is the addition of Argus. We've looked at that in a previous video. I'd like to say that now we have access to all three of Argus's zones. I can give some thoughts on that. I'm going to be spoiler-free. Obviously, I don't want to wreck anything for anybody, is that they're treating it, as we thought, very much like Suramar. It's basically, 7.3 is the wind down of Legion, and also the preparation for the next expansion, is what it appears to be. Obviously, it's a little bit speculative, but the way the story, and when I say it's a bit like Suramar, it's a very story-driven zone. Although it's 3 times larger than the Broken Shore, or the Broken Isles, yeah, the Broken Shore. 3 times larger than the Broken Shore. It's actually entirely story-based, pretty much. Well, while there are world quests there, those are world quests that are just unlocked, like various areas. You might have one-off quest that'll unlock the actual world quest for that area, or completing the story will give you the world quest for that area. So that's how they're treating it. Everything else is entirely story-driven. I would not expect, if you're going into this mindset thinking, oh, they're going to give us like a huge zone just swimming in content and quests and stuff like that, something like you might compare to, say, Azuna or Val'sharah, one of the starter zones. That's not how they're doing it, really. They're doing it in very bare bones. Although the areas are quite large, they're more individual quests that are quite extensive. So they're very epic quests. So one quest might have you diving in robots and stuff like that and attacking the Citadel. We are bringing down the Legion's defenses for the most part. And they've also included some side content alongside the world quest, which are the invasion points. Wasn't impressed with these in the least, to be honest. They're mini scenarios, take about 2 to 3 minutes if you know what you're doing, and give you some, of course, arbitrary resource that you can spend in order to acquire things from the new Argus vendors. So, the invasion points I'm not overly impressed with. What I am impressed with is how the story's playing out and the sheer quantity of cutscenes that they have put into this. Blizzard obviously well known for their cutscenes, and as it's a story-driven zone, they have gone overboard with the cutscenes. In every couple of quests, we're getting some sort of major cutscene. Now, currently those cutscenes are hidden from us. They're not going to release them probably until the patch is live, but the quests continue after the cutscene, which kind of lets you know what happened in the cutscenes. And for the most part, they seem really good. Like, the idea of what's in them is something I'm looking forward to, which I think is great. If it's like just the mention of what it should be is very cool. And the good thing as well, and I think Blizzard deserves more credit for this, is as they've decided to go with the zone not for leveling purposes, or just to pad it out with a ton of quests, which they can easily do with world quests anyway, they've managed to make some really good set pieces where they know they can phase you into a little area where they can set up something very, very cool to happen to you, which is much more video gamey than you would expect, really. So you imagine like Call of Duty, and this seems like a weird comparison, but bear with me. Call of Duty's campaign is very appealing to a lot of people because what they managed to do is give you these magnificent set pieces. And now with the phasing technology, they have gone overboard with that in the Argus zone in order to create some very, very cool set pieces. And that all ties into story and stuff. So it's far more video gamey. It's more single player orientated than you probably used to. Now, some people will go, ugh, single player, but in terms of actually just progressing through a story, that works really well. This isn't multiplayer based content, this is more single player based content. So from that perspective, I'm actually really happy with it. Some other thoughts then. The Nether Crucible. Let's talk about the Nether Crucible. So if you're not aware of what this is Blizzard's solution to the fact that no one gives a toss about AP anymore. Once they hit Concordance, nobody gives a shit. And Blizzard's very driven and has been throughout Legion, and I would expect this to continue into the next expansion, with making sure you always have something to do, and the reward, even if it's not exactly what you want, there is a reward tied to it which benefits you in some way. So the way they've solved the Concordance problem, which Blizzard does see as a problem and you might not, is to create the Nether Crucible. Now, the Nether Crucible is using some tech that they wanted to put in 7.2.5, and that is the idea of dual relics. These are relics to provide you with 2 traits. The Nether Crucible is something you unlock by progressing through the story of Argus. Once you've done 2/3 of Argus, you will get access to the Nether Crucible. And what you do here is place your relics that are within your weapon. Okay, so these are relics that you actually have equipped within your weapon. And depending on your concordance level, you then get a mini sort of talent tree to work through. Now, these talent trees work in a very simple way, and it all ties to your concordance level. So if you have concordance, like the first level of concordance, you get access to tier 1, which will give you 5 item levels at the moment. Now, I want to point out here, and to be absolutely clear, is the final product of the Nether Crucible, because a lot of people hate this, particularly in the high levels, really dislike this system. However, I think it honestly will benefit way, way more players than it will actually hurt. Is you'll gain 5 item levels on your relic, for whatever relic you have equipped, and it doesn't seemingly so far cost you anything. It just depends on what concordance level you have. It doesn't say anything other than that. You don't need to give it crystals or something yet. You might have to in the live version, but right now you do not. So then you get a choice of 2 pathways to go. And these pathways are basically dictated by whatever the last traits that you unlock at your high concordance are. So you get the 5 item levels first, then you get a choice of 2 traits, which will be some sort of random buff. And there are quite a lot of variables here. I've seen ones that go up to giving you randomly 600,000 damage from 30... somewhere between 30,000 to 600,000. Kind of like the Satan neck enchant, where it just randomly fires off some damage. But also seen ones that go to like 100k to something else. I kind of suspect that these are all kind of balanced to either proc more or do something more, depending on the power of them. I'm hoping that's how they work out, is that they're pretty even across the board. After that, as this splits into 2, from each one of those, you then get a choice of 2, right? Of 2 extra traits for that relic. So you have to pick one of 2. That means that you have to basically look at what the 3 choices are at the end, and then dictate which path you're going to go. So you don't really have a choice in what tier 2 you want to take, which is quite annoying when it's random. And it might not proc on a balanced system. But you then get to pick what extra trait this relic will have. Now, people, especially at the high end, are really pissed at this, because what it seems to be that whatever the final choices of extra relic traits are is entirely random. Entirely random. And anybody who's played this game for more than a little while will understand that certain traits are considerably more powerful than others. So for a Frost Mage, for example, I might end up with something that, like a relic that I put in, and the choices I have at the bottom are more ice barrier, right? Or something ridiculous like that compared to a trait I actually want. Now, Blizzard is aware of this. So what they've done is give you a preview window for relics that you pick up. So if you pick up a relic and you don't want to put it in your weapon yet because you're not sure what end extra relic choices you're going to get, then you can preview it, and it will show you what this relic is going to eventually become, and from there you can decide whether you want to actually put it in your weapon or not. Now, this is wonderful. This is great, because the only alternative to this is to use the relics that you get, stick it in your weapon, then go to the Nether Crucible and realize, great, I got shitty choices for what the second trait would be. So that is the counter to what they're doing to that. So you are basically on a path. It's just to benefit you from concordance. Now, this will be something that some of you might be a bit pissed at, especially if you put concordance into multiple weapons, like I've done that. Now, it's not going to be a problem because, of course, AK is rising. Yes, Artifact Knowledge is going to go up to 55. You're going to get a new one on the day the patch releases, and that's going to just shoot up your artifact power gains, so it should trivialize any of the concordance you've already got. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Obviously, they were going to give us that AK previously. Now they've just moved it into 7.3. Will it make concordance more relevant? Yes, at least up until you get the 3rd relic slot, which is where you will be aiming for when 7.3 comes. I don't recommend you go overly hardcore farming concordance now, because the new artifact knowledge will quickly catch up. So there's nothing to worry about too much there. The new dungeon. So we have a new dungeon, the Seat of the Triumvirate. I'm not going to spoil it too much. I've done it 3 times now, and each time I've kind of lost more and more interest in it. Now, I don't mean to be a negative Nancy on this. I really don't want to be. But it's okay, is where I would rate it. It's okay. I would put it in the realms of, like, a Dark Heart Thicket. Luckily, it's not particularly long. They recently altered it, so you get a slightly different intro to it. But it's not overly long. The bosses are kind of back-to-back. Which is fine. I mean, it gets times your bloodlust and stuff like that. And they've worked it, so I think this is more designed around the idea it's going to be used for Mythic Plus. I would put the length somewhere about Maw of Souls-ish. With an organized group, it's about Maw of Souls-ish. It does have some very irritating debuffs, which again makes me go, ugh. And some mechanics which are just like very boring. There's a lot of RP in the zone, which I know will be getting frustrated. It's not as bad as something like Trial of the Crusader, which is something you definitely need to bear in mind. It's not like Trial of the Crusader annoying, but it is annoying nonetheless to have this stop-start happen a couple of moments into the instance, and you're like, okay, I just want to carry on. That's it, I just want to carry on playing. I don't need to listen to this little bit of dialogue every time I come here. So whether or not they're going to keep that or not, I don't know. I would rather they remove that because it's just an irritation more than anything. 7.3 so far to me seems pretty solid. I just want people to have the right expectations. I'm not going overboard here and saying 7.3 is the best thing of all time or anything ridiculous like that. I don't believe that. I think what they're doing here is definitely getting us ready for what the next expansion is. And once you play through the story, you'll probably have a pretty solid idea of what the next expansion is. And it's almost a guarantee. I mean, to put it into context, I've been asked multiple times by Blizzard if I'm going to BlizzCon this year, which I'm not. And they were like, you should really be there. I'm like, yeah, I get what you're trying to hint at. I get what you're saying, but in many ways, it's actually better if I'm not there, given what I do for a job, although I really want to be there. And they're like, you should really come. And I'm like, are you going to pay for it? Because it's like £6,000 to send us to BlizzCon. And are you going to pay for that? They're like, you know, like that. And I'm like, okay, then I'm going to say no this time and hope for the best, because it's pretty, it's almost guaranteed. I mean, nothing's ever a guarantee, but it's almost a guarantee the new expansion is going to be there. There will be some content after Legion, I've no doubt, just to completely wrap up after Argus, in order to completely wrap up the story. But at this point, this entire zone, and I've got to say, props to them for just making sure they've got their bases covered and using what they learned in Suramar, which is people loved the story the first time, right? They loved the Suramar story. One thing I could say about Argus is it's very, very short on quests, but the quests they do have are very interesting. So it's not going to be like Suramar is now, which is, I never want to do that again on any alt. I actually tried recently to go through Suramar and all, and I know some of you have done it, but it's awful. I find it absolutely the most tedious nonsense ever, and Argus is shaping up to be nothing like that. You might only get something like 6 or 7 quests per island, but those quests are very, very cool. Very, very cool. It's more than that. It's about 14 or something like that. But they're not arbitrary quests. They're quests that involve nice set pieces and all that kind of thing, and obviously some cool story to tell that all leads up to going into the dungeon, then it ultimately will lead to the new raid. So those are my thoughts so far. I think most people are probably expecting me to say more on the Nether Crucible. What I will say is I'm going to keep my eye on it. Right now, it doesn't seem to be finished. The idea is there. They want to put these double trait relics into the game. They want to find a way to keep AP relevant until the end of the expansion. And right now, it is not for many, many players. And that seems to be where they're going with it. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.